When the storm comes, the thing about hurricanes is that they give you warning. 72 hours, 48, 24. But no matter how much time you have, you're never actually ready when the wind hits 130 miles per hour and the Gulf of Mexico decides to reclaim the land. I learned that at 24 during Hurricane Katrina. I was an intern at the aquarium, responsible for evacuating tropical fish while the city drowned. We saved most of them, not all. Some animals you can't move fast enough, some tanks you can't drain in time, some decisions you make at 2 a.m. in rising water that haunt you for years. 5 years later, I'm the Senior Marine Biologist at Audubon Aquarium of the Americas, and I still think about the ones we lost. My name is Dr. Finn Rousseau, French-Cajun family, 7th generation Louisiana, grew up on the bayou, learning to read tides and storms, the way some kids learn to read books. I study marine mammals, dolphins, sea lions, the intelligent creatures that remind you the ocean isn't just water and fish, it's an entire universe we barely understand. Most days, I love this job. Some days I prepare for hurricanes and remember why this city lives on borrowed time. This particular morning, August, 5:30 a.m., 86 degrees and the air already thick enough to taste, I was standing in our dolphin habitat watching Delphine do her morning patrol. She was our oldest resident, 32 years, rescued from a fishing net injury that left her unable to survive in open water. Smart, stubborn, absolutely convinced she ran this facility. My radio crackled. "Finn, we've got a problem." That was Marcus, our operations director. Problems from Marcus meant serious problems. What kind of problem? Hurricane Camille just intensified to Category 4. New track puts landfall at the Mississippi River Delta in 36 hours. We're under mandatory evacuation. My stomach dropped. 36 hours. We had protocols for 48, 72. 36 was tight. Really tight. I'm calling the team. We start evacuation procedures now. Hurricane protocols at an aquarium are brutal. You can't just leave. You have backup generators, emergency life support, animals that can't evacuate, dolphins, sea lions, penguins, thousands of fish. Some you can transport to inland facilities. Some you have to secure in place and pray the building holds. We'd been running drills for years. We knew the choreography. We just didn't know if 36 hours was enough. By noon, we were in full crisis mode. Transport trucks for the penguins and sea lions, portable tanks for critical fish species, emergency generators tested and retested. The dolphins were the complication. Too large to move easily, too intelligent to handle poorly, too valuable to leave unprotected. I was checking Delphine's tank parameters when someone knocked on the habitat observation window. Not someone from our team. Someone in an orange offshore safety jumpsuit, carrying a heavy-duty medical bag, looking completely out of place in an aquarium. I opened the access door. "Can I help you?" "Dr. Rousseau, I'm Mateo Vega, offshore medical tech with Gulf Coast Petroleum. We've got an emergency situation and we need marine biology expertise immediately." "I'm in the middle of a hurricane evacuation." "I know. This is related." He was already moving, expecting me to follow. "We've got an injured dolphin tangled in offshore rigging near one of our platforms. Storm surge is coming in, and the platform's evacuating in 4 hours. If we don't get that dolphin free before evacuation, it dies. But we need someone who knows dolphin anatomy and behavior to coordinate the rescue without causing additional injury." I stopped walking. "You want me to leave my facility during a hurricane evacuation to rescue a wild dolphin?" "Yes." He met my eyes, dark brown, intense. The look of someone who'd made a decision and wasn't changing it. "Because that dolphin is going to die if someone doesn't help, and you're the closest marine biologist with the expertise to do it. Coast Guard is sending a boat. We leave in 20 minutes. Every logical bone in my body said no, said my responsibility was here, to these animals, to this facility, to the evacuation protocols we'd drilled for years. But there was a dolphin tangled, offshore that was going to drown, when the storm surge hit. "Give me 15 minutes to brief my team." Something shifted in Mateo's expression. Relief. Respect, maybe both. "Thank you." The Coast Guard boat was fast, loud, and absolutely not designed for comfort. We hit the offshore platform in 40 minutes. The Gulf already showing white caps and the sky that specific greenish-grey that means weather's coming fast. The platform was organized chaos, crew evacuating, helicopters landing and taking off, everyone moving with the urgency of people who know what hurricanes do to offshore structures. Mateo led me to the east side. There, see her? The dolphin was tangled in subsurface rigging maybe 30 feet down. Fishing net wrapped around her tail and dorsal fin, caught on the platform's stabilization cables. She was surfacing every 90 seconds for air, visibly exhausted, every breath weaker. How long has she been like this? I asked. We spotted her 2 hours ago. She's been fighting the whole time. Mateo was pulling out equipment, diving gear, cutting tools, first aid supplies. I'm dive certified for offshore emergency response. Tell me how to approach without making it worse. I assessed the situation. Dolphins panic when restrained. She's already exhausted and stressed. If you approach wrong, she'll fight harder, burn through her remaining oxygen, potentially drown both of you. So what's the approach? I explained dolphin behavior under stress, the signs of panic versus exhaustion, how to position for cutting the net without triggering flight response, where to support her body weight while working. Mateo listened with the focus of someone whose job involved saving lives in impossible conditions. I'm going down with you, I said. You're not dive certified for offshore. I'm dive certified for marine mammal rescue, which includes offshore operations. And you need someone who can read her behavior in real time. 2-person rescue, standard protocol. He assessed me. 5'11", lean but athletic. Steady hands despite the adrenaline. Okay, but I lead the dive. You follow my safety calls. Deal? Deal. We geared up. Hit the water. The Gulf was warm and murky. Visibility maybe 15 feet. The dolphins saw us coming and thrashed. Panic response. Burning energy she didn't have. I signaled Mateo to hold position. Started vocalizing. Not words, just calm sounds. The kind of audio stimulus that tells dolphins, not a threat, not a predator, possibly help. It's not language, but it's communication. She slowed, watched us, still scared but less panicked. Mateo moved in, slow, careful, positioning himself to cut the netting from her tail. I stayed at her head, maintaining the vocal pattern. One hand on her rostrum in the specific touch that says, I'm here, you're okay, we're helping. It took 12 minutes. 12 minutes of cutting net, supporting her weight, keeping her calm, while storm surge started building and the platform crew radioed that we had 90 minutes until mandatory evacuation. When the last piece of net fell away, she didn't bolt. She hung there for 5 seconds, looking at us, or maybe looking at me, hard to tell with dolphins, then slowly swam deeper and disappeared into the murky water. We surfaced, climbed back onto the platform, stood there dripping and breathing hard. That was incredible, Mateo said. The way you communicated with her, I've never seen anything like that. Marine mammals are intelligent. You treat them like intelligent creatures, they respond. I stripped off my dive gear. You did good work down there. Clean cuts, minimal stress to the animal. You've done rescue diving before. Offshore emergency response includes marine rescue protocols. But I've never worked with a marine biologist before. He smiled. First real smile I'd seen, warm and genuine. You're really good at this. So are you. A helicopter landed nearby. Final evacuation for platform personnel. Mateo checked his watch. We need to move. Storm's accelerating. We made it back to New Orleans with 2 hours before the outer bands hit. The aquarium evacuation was 90% complete. Most animals secured, emergency protocols active. Skeleton crew staying to ride out the storm. I was checking final generator connections when Mateo appeared in the dolphin habitat. Shouldn't you be evacuating? I asked. Offshore platforms are evacuated. I'm based in New Orleans when I'm not on the rig. He looked around the habitat. I wanted to check if you needed extra hands. I've got emergency medical training. I'm good in crisis situations, and I don't have anywhere else to be for the next 12 hours. The offer surprised me. You want to ride out a hurricane in an aquarium? I want to help. If you'll let me, I should have sent him away. Should have followed protocol. Kept only essential personnel. Played it safe. But there was something about the way he'd worked that rescue. Calm under pressure. Trusting my expertise, moving with the kind of competence that comes from years of emergency response. Okay, I said, you're on dolphin monitoring. If anything goes wrong with their systems during the storm, I need to know immediately. You got it. Hurricane Camille hit at 8 p.m. with the full fury of a Category 4 system. Wind that sounded like freight trains. Rain that came in horizontal sheets. Storm surge pushing the Mississippi backward and flooding the quarter. We lost main power at 10 p.m. Generators kicked in. We lost one generator at midnight. Backup protocols engaged, redirecting power to critical life support. The building shook, creaked, groaned like a living thing. Mateo stayed calm through all of it, monitored systems, helped me run emergency protocols, kept me focused when I started catastrophizing about animal losses. Around 2 a.m., when the eye passed over and gave us 20 minutes of eerie silence, we sat on the floor of the dolphin observation area with emergency lights casting everything in amber. "You do this often?" Mateo asked. "Ride out hurricanes with marine mammals?" "Third time. It never gets easier." I ran a hand through my hair. "I keep thinking about Katrina, the animals we lost, wondering if I'm making the same mistakes." "You're not. Your protocols are solid. Your team is good. You're doing everything right." "What if it's not enough?" "Then it's not enough. But that doesn't mean you didn't try." He shifted closer. "Finn, I've worked offshore emergency response for 7 years. I've seen people freeze in crisis, make terrible decisions, put themselves and others at risk. You're not doing that. You're staying calm, following protocols, making good calls. That matters." The honesty in that made my chest tight. "Thanks. Can I ask you something personal?" My heart kicked. "Sure. Are you seeing anyone?" "Oh, no. Work makes it complicated. Marine biology doesn't keep normal hours. Hurricane season is constant crisis prep. Most people don't get it. I get it." He smiled slightly. "I work 2 weeks on offshore platforms, 1 week off, 12-hour shifts in isolation, emergency medical calls at 3 a.m. My last boyfriend told me I was married to the job. Were you?" "Yeah, I was. No hesitation. But I'm trying to find balance, trying to find someone who understands that offshore work matters, but so does..." He gestured between us. "So does this. Whatever this is." "This feels like something," I said carefully. "It does." His hand was close to mine on the floor. "Want to see where it goes?" I kissed him there in the dolphin habitat during a hurricane with emergency lights and storm sounds, and Delphine watching from her tank like she was judging my romantic choices. His hand came to my jaw, mine to his waist, and everything about him was steady and warm even in the chaos. When we pulled apart, we were both grinning. "That's a good start," Mateo murmured. "Really good start," I agreed. But here's what I didn't know then. Mateo Vega wasn't just an offshore medic who helped rescue dolphins and stayed calm during hurricanes. He was the kind of person who worked 2 weeks straight on oil platforms in the Gulf, handling medical emergencies for crews far from hospitals, then came back to land and immediately looked for ways to help more, who carried trauma from offshore accidents he couldn't prevent, who stayed steady for everyone else because someone had to be steady. And I was about to spend the next 6 months learning exactly what that cost. The hurricane passed. The aquarium survived, all animals safe, minimal damage, generators held. New Orleans flooded in the expected places, drained in the expected timeline, started rebuilding like we always do. Mateo stayed for the cleanup, helped us get systems back online, assisted with animal health checks, proved himself weirdly competent at electrical repairs. "Offshore platforms require multidisciplinary skills," he explained while rewiring a pump. "Medical tech, electrical, mechanical, whatever keeps people alive and systems running. That's a lot of skills. That's the job." He finished the connection, tested the system. "Perfect. What's next?" We grabbed coffee 3 days after the storm, then dinner, then breakfast because he'd stayed over, and we woke up tangled in my bed with morning light through the windows and the specific contentment of finding someone who fits. We fell into something real over the next months. His 2 weeks on 1 week off rotation somehow, working with my unpredictable aquarium schedule. We learned each other in pieces. Mateo made incredible arepas from his Venezuelan grandmother's recipe. I could identify individual dolphins by their vocalizations. He had a scar on his right forearm from an offshore cable accident. I had a collection of marine biology texts going back to grad school. He was meticulous about emergency prep. Go bags always packed, protocols always followed, nothing left to chance. I was the same with animal care, obsessive about health monitoring and environmental parameters. We fit together in ways that surprised me. 2 people who worked in crisis, who understood that sometimes you drop everything for an emergency, who knew what it meant to lose someone despite doing everything right. "You know what I thought the first time I saw you?" Mateo said one night, both of us on my couch after he'd been offshore for 2 weeks, that I was covered in salt water and looked stressed. "That too," he laughed, "but also that you were the most focused person I'd ever seen. The way you assessed that dolphin, the way you directed the rescue, The certainty in your voice. He searched for words. It was really attractive. Very attractive. You thought I was attractive while we were rescuing a drowning dolphin. I'm excellent at multitasking. He kissed my shoulder. Crisis response and attractive person assessment simultaneously. That's a very specific skill. I'm a very specific person. He propped himself up to look at me. Finn, I really like this. Us. Even with my offshore rotation. I pulled him closer. I really like it too. You make the distance work. We make it work, he corrected. But there were cracks I didn't see. Small stress fractures in the foundation we were building. Mateo took every offshore shift, every emergency call, every medical situation that came up on the platforms. He worked his 2 weeks on with barely any sleep, handled trauma and illness and accidents for crews who had nowhere else to go, came back exhausted and wired, couldn't fully decompress, carried every patient he couldn't save. You need rest between rotations, I said after he'd been back for 3 days and still wasn't sleeping well. I'm fine, just adjusting. You're not fine. You worked 70 hours last week on the platform. You need actual recovery time. People depend on me out there. I can't half-ass offshore medical work. I'm not asking you to half-ass anything. I'm asking you to take care of yourself. I'm taking care of myself. But his hands were shaking slightly as he said it. I recognized the pattern because I'd lived it myself, overworked. Professionals who kept pushing past safe limits, insisting they were fine until suddenly they weren't. Mateo, I said carefully, you can't be the only medical support for an entire platform. There have to be redundancies, backup systems. There are, but I'm the primary. If something goes wrong on my watch and I'm not performing at full capacity, people die. And there it was, the weight he'd been carrying since before I met him. The breaking point came in late October. Mateo had been offshore for his regular 2-week rotation. Normal work, nothing unusual. He came back on schedule, seemed okay. Then his phone rang at midnight. I watched him answer, watched his face change, watched every muscle lock. I understand. I'll be there in 3 hours. He started pulling on clothes. Mateo, emergency callback, medical crisis on the platform. They need me. You just finished a 2-week rotation. You've been back for 8 hours. One of the crew had a cardiac event. He specifically requested me because I treated him before. He trusts me. Mateo was moving on autopilot, grabbing gear, checking supplies. I have to go. You're not physically ready. I'm a medical professional. I don't get to not be ready. He stopped, looked at me. Finn, I have to do this. I wanted to physically prevent him from leaving, but I understood duty, and I understood that sometimes people need you and saying no feels impossible. Be safe, I said instead. He kissed me, quick and distracted. Always am. He wasn't. The call came 18 hours later from Gulf Coast Petroleum's operations director. Mateo had handled the cardiac emergency successfully. Patient stable, helicopter evacuated to hospital, expected to survive. But during the extended medical response, Mateo had worked 32 straight hours without rest, made a minor documentation error that wouldn't have happened if he'd been properly rested. Company policy, mandatory stand-down, fitness for duty evaluation, meeting with their medical oversight board. I found him at his apartment, sitting on his balcony staring at the Gulf. Hey, I said softly, sitting beside him. I made a mistake. His voice was hollow. Wrong medication dosage in the paperwork. Didn't affect patient care. The correct dose was administered. But the documentation was wrong. 32 hours awake and I couldn't do basic record keeping. I took his hand. What did Ops say? Mandatory rest before next rotation. Evaluation by company medical director. Possible reassignment if it happens again. He finally looked at me. Finn, I've never made an error like that. Not in 7 years. I've worked hundreds of hours exhausted and never until now. Because there's a limit to what one person can do, even you. But what if someone needs me and I'm not there? Then someone else helps them. Gulf Coast has other medical personnel. You have colleagues and backup and redundancy systems. I shifted to face him. Mateo, I love you. I've loved you since you showed up at my aquarium with a rescue plan and absolute certainty. But watching you destroy yourself trying to be available for every single emergency is killing me. His eyes filled. I don't know how to not be that person. Then let me help you learn. I pulled him closer. You told me once that I did everything right during the hurricane, that my protocols were solid. Same applies to you. You have to follow protocols, including the ones about rest and recovery and letting other people share the load. Because if you burn out completely, you can't help anyone. Including you, he said quietly. Including us. He nodded. Okay, I'll try. Epilogue. 8 months later, recovery isn't linear. Neither is learning boundaries or finding sustainable work rhythms or building a relationship with someone who's still learning. He doesn't have to carry everything alone. But we made it work. Mateo negotiated a modified rotation, still offshore but with mandatory minimum downtime between deployments, with company-supported rest protocols and better staffing redundancy. Started seeing a therapist who specialized in first responder stress. Actually used his week off for recovery instead of looking for additional work. I learned his patterns, the signs when he was taking on too much, the way his shoulders tensed when he felt responsible for things outside his control, learned how to support without enabling, how to remind him that rest wasn't abandoning people. He learned mine too, the way I got anxious before hurricane season, the protective instinct toward my animals that sometimes made me ignore my own needs, learned how to pull me back when I was overdoing it, how to remind me that I'd built good systems and could trust them. We built something steady, something that flexed with his offshore schedule and my seasonal crises instead of breaking. One morning in June, summer heat already brutal, Gulf flat and blue, I woke to find Mateo on my balcony watching dolphins in the distance. You okay? I asked, wrapping arms around him from behind. Yeah. He leaned back into me. Just thinking, about that dolphin. The one we rescued before the hurricane. I was out on the platform last week and saw a dolphin with a distinctive scar pattern on her dorsal fin. Looked exactly like the net damage we cut away. He turned to look at me. I think it was her. I think she survived. My chest felt too full. That's amazing. Made me think about what you said. About treating marine mammals like intelligent creatures. About respect and communication and partnership. He smiled. Made me think about us, actually. About how this works because we treat each other like partners, because we respect each other's expertise, because we communicate. I pulled him closer. We're good at partnership. We are. He kissed me there on the balcony with morning light and Gulf breeze and 8 months of learning each other behind us. Finn, I love you. I love that you understand offshore work, that you don't ask me to choose between the job and us, that you helped me learn how to do both. I love you too. Since you showed up in your orange jumpsuit with a rescue plan and absolute faith I could help. I held him tighter. You're allowed to love the work and love us. They're not mutually exclusive. Neither are you, he murmured. 8 months after meeting during a hurricane evacuation and dolphin rescue, standing with an offshore medic who saved lives and learning how to save his in return, I realized something. Some people spend their whole lives looking for someone who understands. Someone who gets that the work matters, but so does coming home. Someone who knows what it means to carry weight, and when it's time to share the load. I found that person in an orange jumpsuit carrying a medical bag and absolute certainty that we could save a dolphin together. That's not a bad story, that's not bad at all.